you all. Welcome to this webinar. Before we start, I'll just briefly do an introduction. I'm Zair Fakir. I'm from South Africa. I'm a member of the Standing Committee on Finance, and I'm one of the co-facilitators of the Needs Determination Report. I've been nominated by the Standing Committee to co-facilitate this together with my colleague from Matthias from Sweden. Matthias, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Good morning and greetings from Stockholm. Hope everyone is well. Looking forward to hearing your views at this webinar. Thank you.
Very much, Matthias. Just if you have on your screen right now, just a brief outline of how we intend dealing with the webinar. We'll be doing just a brief introduction. Then there'll be an overview of the ongoing work on needs for Asia Pacific. And we have colleagues from the team there. So there's Heidi, Sandra, George, and Atina. And then we'll have a 60-minute session in which there'll be a discussion. I will take you through the first part of the introductions, and then my colleague Matthias will be doing the moderation around the discussion. With that said, let's start. Firstly, this webinar is the first series of regional outreach webinars, which is being organized in the context of preparing the first report on the determination of needs of developing countries related to the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And this is being done by the Standing Committee. We've been mandated to do this and present this to the COP for deliberations. By way of quick background, if we can get the next slide, please. The Standing Committee is a constituted body that serves the Convention and the Paris Agreement on climate finance matters. The Standing Committee on Finance received the mandate to prepare this report every 4 years, and this mandate was given to us during the COP24 in Katowice. The report will inform COP26, and it will be made available, and this is the Secretariat can guide me there. It should have been made available in 2020, whether the report will be available late 2020 or early 2021. But this, in terms of the decision of the COP, decision 4 CP24, paragraph 13, it was required for 2020. Now turning to the topic, the twin objective of this informal regional webinar is one, to share with you perspectives, data and information on regional and country level data availability and gaps, as well as the latest developments in methodological issues from national, regional, and global reports. The Standing Committee on Finance has also issued a call for evidence, and this is available on the UNFCCC website, unfccc.int/SCF. Responses that was received to date are available on the information repository of the Standing Committee on Finance website. And if the Secretariat can just show us those slides as well. You have the repository there, and so that's where information can be found. We intend to use the next 90 minutes to firstly briefly give an overview of the report and the approach. We will then invite the technical team to introduce the preliminary technical work that has been undertaken thus far. And after the team presentation, we will open the floor for discussions. We'd also like to encourage active participation from all participants. In terms of some organizational matters, and this is some housekeeping matters, should registered participants wish to make an intervention, we would kindly ask you to indicate this, preferably by using the raise hand function. That is a function on your computer, or you may have it on your phone, or by typing your name into the chat, and the Secretariat will help us in keeping the list of speakers. The webinar is also an open event and therefore also broadcasted. The link for this broadcast is available on the UNFCCC website to all participants that are not registered participants. However, this is only a view-only function on that side. A kind reminder for participants to use the audio-only function and to keep microphones on mute. to assist us with connectivity for all participants. Request the participants also to turn off your videos when not presenting information. This is an informal regional webinar, and it is being recorded to facilitate development of the report. And unless there is any objections from anybody, so far nobody has objected to it. So kindly note that this is recorded, but purely for report purposes. In terms of the report itself, the report will map available information and data on the needs of developing country parties from a variety of sources, such as national reports, including those submitted to the UNFCCC, as well as regional and global reports. In presenting the needs of developing country parties, the report will characterize needs for finance, technology development and transfer, and capacity building, thematic areas and sectors across Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Furthermore, the report will highlight processes and approaches utilized for the determination of needs of developing country parties, underlying assumptions and methodologies, as well as challenges, the gaps, opportunities, and in the needs determination. Building on the initial work undertaken last year, the technical team, under our guidance and with the support of the Secretariat, has done some initial work, starting with information and data gathering and then drafting of individual chapters. The drafting process is currently ongoing, and further work will be completed, for example, related to terminology, presentation, and format. Initial information and figures that the technical team will go into in more detail in the coming weeks and months, providing a snapshot of analysis to data and illustrate how data might be presented in the future. We anticipate that at the upcoming SCF 22nd meeting, which is taking place now in September, the SCF members have provided more guidance and on further work that needs to be done, including presentation of information and the draft report. The structure and flow of the report would follow an outline agreed at the 21st meeting of the SCF last year, and this webinar comes timely as it gives us the opportunity to discuss and provide further guidance to the technical team in terms of the development of the report. In relation to the sources of information, following a mapping of available data and information from national, regional, and global reports, the team has been analyzing needs from a bottom-up perspective by country, region, thematic areas, sectors, means of implementation and timeframes, meaning short, medium, and long-term needs. For a more top-down perspective, the team has also looked at regional and global reports and such reports relating to the multilateral development banks, UN agencies, and other institutions. In addition, all submissions that have been received to the response for call for evidence will be considered. Given that there's a vast amount of information contained in the official national reports to the UNFCCC and the limited time to consider all the available information, it is still at this point premature to draw any findings or conclusions that can be shared today. The technical team will therefore present initial findings and trends and invite you for your inputs, particularly related to information that might inform the development of the report on data availability and gaps, methodological processes, challenges, and opportunities. At this point, just to introduce the team, I would like to invite the team to introduce themselves and the initial work that was done. The floor is open. Heidi, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Zahir, for the introduction. And Matthias, also thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of the team. My name is Heidi. I'm from Indonesia. I'm one of the consultant expert team members, working together with other colleagues, George from South Africa, and also they're also from the UNFCCC, and Sandra from Latin American region. I would like just to start with emphasizing that the data and analysis that I'm going to present here today is not 100% completed, and this is only based on available information taken from national reports. We aim to improve this analysis based on your feedback, comments, further data collection, plus additional submission from the call for evidence. Next slide, please. So the good news is that we have Chapter 2, overview of the needs and available information. We have primary findings that show some overview of data on needs from national, regional, and global reports. However, some aspects are more available than the others. Some information is rather incomplete. As the preliminary attempt, we create this so-called a shell diagram to show some early illustration. For the national level data in this diagram, in the blue at the center, we only use information from the NDC, and we don't mix up with other reports such as NatCom, UR, NAPS, and others to avoid double counting needs stated in other type of reports. So we collect and define needs based on all the parties' reported needs, whether or not accompanied by financial information. And those are represented as either descriptive running text or tabulated information in tables. And this information on needs include plan activities, strategic directions, national priorities, and action plans related to climate change mitigation, adaptation, loss, and damage. So we do not collect data only from tables in the report, but also from text, paragraph by paragraph, as long as it's stated as needs. So far, it shows that there are around 3,500 plus activities needed to be done by developing country parties, as stated in NDC. But only we see that is in those 3,500 is in the blue circle with a light shade, and the 20% of it, which is the dark shade, are those activities with financial information. So these activities with financial information comprises needs across means of implementation and other areas such as policy development, institutional arrangement, MRV, and other things like communication and reporting, including needs determination. At the regional and global reports, the information on specific sector, namely energy, is more available. And any other regional information on other sectors such as forestry, agriculture, industry, waste is most welcome since we do not have this information as such to be included in our analysis yet. So this is becomes part of our information gap that we are looking for. We also find there is some global estimated cost on adaptation, but cost estimation by sector and regional can be very useful for our exercise in the next iteration. Next slide, please. Some primary analysis we have done is trying to understand the different pattern of needs by time frame. We find that needs expanding from 5 to 10 years and above 10 years are dominated by energy and transport sectors. In particularly in Asia Pacific, these activities are characterized by a large mega projects or programs. A question regarding to where is the forestry sector does not appear quite strongly because the activities in this sector does have little financial information. For the need activities with less than 5 years are dominated in certain sectors, namely in water, agriculture, and health sectors. And in general, there are more long-term needs stated in the NDC compared to the short-term needs. We also find some projects specifically addressing vulnerable communities and indigenous peoples are still limited in terms of numbers. Next slide, please. We collect data from national reports separately, and we do not accumulate numbers across different national reports. This is again to avoid double counting. Some national reports are better in terms of country coverage, and some are better in terms of available financial information. For example, NDC and NC have large scope covering more than 120 countries, but the number of needs with financial information is better covered under the NDC. Hence, we use the NDC data to illustrate needs in the shell diagram compared to, for example, the national communication. Next slide, please. Here is part of the chapter 3. We discuss some processes and approaches for determining needs. We identify major steps in identifying these needs, although these steps varies widely across countries. In terms of who leads the process of determining needs, the common one that we find is led by a committee or a climate change unit within the lead ministry, such as the Ministry of Environment. And we have also identified 4 common steps in determining needs. As shown, the first process is where there is a high-level engagement within the government officials. And in some countries, maybe at the presidency level, and in some countries at the lower level, such as the ministerial level. The second step in the process is the establishment of institutional arrangement. This is for better coordination and consolidation of information. The third at the process is consultation with stakeholders. And the last is the definition of country needs based on consolidated information from various sectors and documents. Next slide, please. Yeah, we also see a common pattern of processes used in determining needs. Specifically in Asia Pacific, these are determined by top-down approach using government development strategies and action plan. Here in the map, it's with blue color. And some countries like Malaysia, although in Asia, and Qatar, in Middle East, using policies as the guiding document to determine their needs. These policies are usually vague with very little details, but they tend to have a need for additional information, but also very clear in terms of the objectives. For these countries, the needs are usually not clear, and as the top-down model using the action plan, they especially do not have financial details and clear timelines. Another process to determine needs is stakeholder consultation. This is quite common in Africa and Latin American countries. Next slide, please. So we further analyze stakeholder involved in the stakeholder consultation. At the right-hand side of in the diagram, as you can see, the majority of countries engage either on government only for the stakeholder consultation or extend the consultation to include NGOs and private sectors. But countries that include communities are not many. We also see that most countries are not explicitly report the to include gender aspect in their consultation, although in reality they might have. Next slide, please. This is part of the chapter 4. In chapter 4, we explain the methodology used in determining needs and as well as the assumption. In this table, we show that there are some general guidance provided for countries in reporting their needs, but mostly do not require countries to include methodology and assumptions. So it is not always clear what type of information the countries need to include. Some countries provide detailed information and some others do not include the information. The implication of this is that the data on methods and assumptions are fairly limited for us to collect. Across all national reports, TNA has more detailed guidance, and hence the information that are provided from the report. It's coming out in the semi-structured format and easier to extract. And it's quite harmonized across all countries and include the actual cost of specific technologies. Some example of methods such as multi-criteria analysis used in the TNAs. Next slide, please. Here we present some examples of methodologies in determining mitigation needs. The methodologies are sector specific, so the different sectors have their own method. Some examples such as life cycle method, emission trajectories and projections, and MRV systems to identify the gaps in specific sector, and then followed with the needs to fill in those gaps. There are more clarity or explanation of methods in specific sector, namely in transport, inventories, and energy. And therefore, the financial cost is also easier to be estimated due to this clarity. Next slide, please. In this next slide, we present some example of methodologies in determining adaptation needs, such as multi-criteria analysis, vulnerability scenario, or assessment. And the key feature of needs determination in adaptation is that it follows more bottom-up approach compared to the mitigation needs. And the clear explanation is mostly coming from key sectors, namely ecosystems, water, and agriculture. And the example of methods to determine capacity building needs is more clearly explained in NAPS and NAPA, while the other national reports, such as the NDC, National Communication, and BUR, have little explanation on the methodology of needs determination for adaptation. With that, I think I would just stop there and return back to Zahir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adi. I will hand over to Matthias at this point, who will manage this part of the session. Matthias?
Thanks, Zahir, and thanks, Adi, for that presentation. I see that also George and Athena from the team are on the call, and if Sandra is here as well, if any of you three would want to just chip in at this stage as well. George or Athena?
No, we're okay now. We're happy to help answer questions, Matthias. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. So I'll then be happy to open the floor for your comments and reflections and your thoughts on what you've just heard, and also sort of your general thoughts on the report as well. As you see, we have sort of three parts in for our discussion today. Maybe we could show all the three slides in a row, and then we could take them one by one. So we would want to have your thoughts both on data availability and gaps. We would also want your thoughts on methodologies and processes, as well as challenges, gaps, and opportunities. And those sort of three bulk of questions would reflect also the various chapters in the report. And of course, you're more than welcome to comment more generally as well, but just sort of to help us guide our discussion today, I thought it would be useful to go through the questions as raised on the slides. So maybe if we could start with this part on the data availability and gaps. If you would want to highlight any other information and data sources that could inform the report, both qualitative and quantitative, and if you have any thoughts on how regional and national needs evolving and how this could be reflected in the report, and also if there are regional case studies which could be reflected on the report. But again, even also if you would have more general thoughts, that would be more than welcome. So I'm happy to open the floor for comments. And as we said initially, just raise your hand and we will see who wants to speak, or just write your name in the chat. Who would want to start? It seems we have some 30, almost 40 participants. So hopefully one of you would be willing to start off our discussion, or just raise questions on the report as such. Maybe that could get us started as well. Everything's crystal clear then, I guess, on the report as such. It seems, maybe did we cover everything? So when we have the report out next year, we'll be having a report which reflects what's already out there.
I see there are two raised hands.
Oh, excellent. Great. Let's see. There we go. I first have a guest from the Maldives, and then Ahmed Fatah Yousafzai. So we'll start with our guest from the Maldives. Please.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
It's Anna from the Maldives. Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that presentation and the intro. We just wanted to clarify whether this report would have sort of analysis of figure on our needs, because what we basically understood from the presentation just now is mostly qualitative. So that's just a clarification.
Could you repeat your question? We lost you there briefly.
Oh. Okay, hi. Yeah, so just first of all, thank you very much for the introduction and the presentation. We just wanted to clarify whether the report would have a quantitative analysis or a figure on our needs, because what we've understood just now is that it's mostly qualitative information, and yeah, that's just a clarification.
All right, thanks very much. Let's go to Ahmad as well for the next question.
Hello to everyone. This is Ahmed Fatih from Afghanistan, Climate Finance Advisor. So my question is that as now your team is working on the report, so as I represent my countries, for my countries, for now, some of the process is ongoing. So we only have the INDC that estimated the needs for finance in different sectors. And also we have the Afghanistan Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan that in this document also mentioned the needs for finance for Afghanistan. But our country program for the GCF in the very initial phase, so there is not clear for us that how much finance will be needed for the some project that will going to be financed through the GCF. How, in case of my country, how the need of finance for Afghanistan in this report will be shows in the future, as your team is right now working on this reports. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those questions. Let's see if we have some more. Tracy, did you want to come in?
Sorry, Matthias, just to flag that we also have a question in the chat box as well.
Excellent. Let's see. Thank you. Yes, many of the documents are quite old. Technology developments move very quickly, especially in the battery and renewable energy space. To what extent does the report authors feel that the data is likely to be outdated? So let's start with those three questions. Maybe if you or anyone else in the team would want to start with the first question on to what extent does the report, to what extent do you and the team feel that the data is likely to be outdated?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, a very relevant one. As we further clarify later on, we take the latest latest national report from each type. So we do not take the old ones, although there are some countries which have submission quite early, which is before 2015. We captured those still needs and put it in the time frame that is or the period that is stated as in the report. So, for example, if the NDC report starts or reported in 2019, that will represent 2019 forward. But of course, if it's reported 2014, we stated in the data that is also starting 2014 forward. So, yeah, there are some limitation, let's say, regarding to how valid the financial information still in that report, because the assumption, although unwritten, is based on the available technology and price at the time of writing. So potentially that also some input to be included in the assumption section, that sometimes the country do not include that assumption, but we read that as a need for our team to include. Yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Thanks. Yes, and I think that also sort of relates to the question from our colleague from Afghanistan, that say provide a snapshot of the information available at the time of doing the report. So obviously there will be, especially now, since countries are producing their new NDCs for this year, but the report, of course, needs to have some kind of cutoff date as well. As we will be able to compile information up to a certain point, and then the analysis has to be done in order for the report to be finished. So at some point in time, we will need sort of to say, this is the information we have right now, and we will work on the basis of that. So there will be both sort of we won't be able to sort of to have, when the report comes out next year, it won't be able to reflect sort of the information which has been produced up until the date of publication, because there will be the time frame we need to actually do the compilation and the analysis. And also, as has been stated, there is likely to be information which could be seen as outdated, since we are basing the report on the available information in earlier reports. And again, this is the first time we're doing this kind of report, at least from the SCF perspective. So it's also a learning process for us, and hopefully we will be able to take on board lessons in the process, which can then be reflected in the work on the next report. But that's in 4 years, so we have a lot to learn as well. On the first question from our colleagues in the Maldives, there will be sort of both quantitative and qualitative analysis in the report. And again, that analysis will reflect the kind of information which is already out there. So as you saw in the presentation, what the team has found that in the present set of NDCs, there is only sort of financial information in 23%, or 23% of the activities in NDCs were costed in some way. So obviously, sort of the quantitative information will be limited to what information is already out there, and that that presents also limits to what the report itself can reflect. But as much as we can, we will be including quantitative analysis as well. see we also had another input in the chat from ADFIAP saying other data source MDBs, so both the World Bank and the regional development banks, and development finance institutions, Global Environment Facility, UNDP, and others. So, and data can also be counter-checked, validated, compared with the data taken from NDCs, amongst others. Heidi, would you have any reflections on that input in the chat?
Yes, thank you for the comments. Yes, I think this is a relevant comment as well to be taken into account. We include regional and global reports. However, we would like to also see how the linkages of this report with the BA, which potentially take more data from the NDBs and other development institution or agencies, which track financial flows and support. So I think we want to focus more on the financial, or we want to focus on the needs determination. So as long as those reports from multilateral development banks and other agencies cover the estimation of needs, as for example, said before in sector gap, for example, in forestry, waste, and other overlooked sectors, we are happy to take that on board for the next iteration.
Thank you. And that's, yes, I mean, it's really, the report is really aiming to sort of to look from various types of perspectives, and including as variety of reports as possible, which are already out there. So both sort of national reports, as you saw on the slides previously, and then regional and global reports coming out from the kind of institutions which were just mentioned. And we've done a mapping of those potential reports which could be included. So both looking into also from those reports, trying to see what could be included in terms of quantitative and qualitative information. So both sort of numbers and methodologies from those kind of reports from banks, UNDP, other UN agencies, and also bilateral agencies, which could have useful information to reflect in the report. And there was a follow-up question there in the chat also, how would the evolving new normal, evolving and post-pandemic be factored in? And I think that also sort of relates to the timeline of elaborating the report itself. If there is information available, which would be factoring in the sort of green recovery aspects, or how countries are responding to the pandemic, also in terms of climate action, there would be an opportunity to include those kind of that in the report as well. But that again depends on how fast that information becomes available for us to take into to look into the report. But I guess it could also be sort of a reflection in a more in an introduction to the report that I mean the demand was given to us in a different context, so to speak. So that could also be reflected in introduction. Or maybe maybe we should, if we move to the next slide. Shall we? Are we now on the next slide? On the slide on methodologies and processes. Secretary, colleagues, would you? Right, we have changed. It's just that I'm not sure what I'm seeing really. Excellent. So, are there any reflections then on what we're seeing in terms of methodologies and processes? If there are other methodologies and processes which are used at national, regional, and global levels, which could be reflected in the report. Which, if you would have examples of methodologies and processes that you are using to determine needs, and if you would see, or if you would wish to highlight any specific advantages or challenges when it comes to using those methodologies. Happy to hear your thoughts on that. There seems to be anything specific coming in, or reflections on and see if there would be reflections on the what you have seen or experienced as challenges in determining needs from the regional or sub-regional perspectives, and where we could find this information, and what are the gaps related to needs of developing countries, and also what are the opportunities related to needs of developing countries, and if there are case studies which we could be reflecting in the report. I see a comment in the chat. If countries have expenditure tracking systems in place, it would be useful to hear an example. Is that something, or someone else in the team could be responding to?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yes. So yes, for example, I think since I'm coming from Indonesia, Indonesia has this climate budget tagging system. The elaboration of the climate budget tagging system for the budgeting might not be yet submitted as part of call for evidence, but yes, we can use that as a case study. But in terms of how it's actually used for next following year budgeting, it's not yet that clear stated in the policy. Just for the information, because I also get involved in the review of the study and also the process of development for this methodology. It's a potential element to be included as a case study. And I encourage also if countries have examples using this data climate budget tagging to determine needs, that will be very useful for us.
Yes, I can really encourage you to make use of the call for evidence, which is still open. So if you have those kind of examples, it would be very helpful for us to get them so they can be reflected in the report. And specifically for this region, as I understand, you've been running a project on climate budgeting for some years, so if any of you on the call would have experience of that particular project, I think that would be interesting, and maybe that's something which we could look into as well see how that could be reflected in the report. George, please.
I just wanted to add something small on the financial tracking. In the African region, we received a request from Rwanda 2 weeks ago. They are currently trying to put up a system within their national budgeting system for tracking climate financial flows. Kenya is also doing the same. They don't have the experience on running the system. So if there is any country that has successfully done this, that would be very, very useful information to share. So I just wanted to put that out there, just in case there is someone with such information, it can be very useful.
Excellent, thanks, George. So yes, please, if there will be additional examples on that, I think that would be very helpful for us. Yes, please.
Just a small comment to a previous question regarding the question from Afghanistan by Ahmad. If there is potentially a story behind how the country deals with needs to determine needs, basically what and what the process has been happening. This can be also submitted as part of call for evidence. So maybe a financial information or activities are not yet captured in this report, but the stories behind how the country is dealing with difficulties and the processes to determining needs is also very relevant. So if from the government or from the civil society has the study regarding on this, please submit as part of call for evidence. So we can include Afghanistan as part of this case study.
Heidi, I think we lost you there a bit, but if I understood you correctly, you were encouraging our colleague from Afghanistan to provide information also on the sort of processes they're going through right now, which could be used as a case study in the report. Was that correct?
Yes, correct. Yes, correct, Matthias.
Thanks. Excellent. We had a reference there from Noel on the climate tagging. It seems to be from the Philippines. So thanks for sharing that. We'll look into that as well. Noel, if you would want to make any sort of reflections from your perspective on that kind of work, please feel free to take the floor as well, just to share some thoughts on climate tagging. Okay. I think I was disconnected there for a while. But we did have a question also in the chat. I'll just read it out for everyone to hear. The reported financial needs tend to be a long list or general statement without specifics. How would you plan to prioritize the collected needs from those official country documents, for example, the national communications, the BORs, NAPs, and NEPAs, in view of implementing NDC and the Paris Agreement? Are you also going to tease out needs by stakeholder types, as priority needs may be perceived differently depending on who you ask? For example, national line ministries or non-state actors. Heidi, would you want to reflect on that?
Sorry, the question is in the chat box, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I think the priority here is which type of national report provide most information. But also we do not want to overlook other type of information which potentially cover more aspect that we are looking for. For example, like the country programs of the GCF has more detailed explanation and quite complete financial information. So if we want to zoom in into specific stories or factors, we will use and state clearly where the source coming from. But in terms of looking at these, the overall or the coverage, we definitely will look into NDC, because we see that the NDC has a closer association and quite explicit link to the Paris Agreement, the achievement of the Paris Agreement. On the second question, sorry, are you also going to?
No, please go ahead. Go ahead. Did you want to continue?
So this one, in terms of needs by stakeholder, we specifically zoom into the, for example, the community and indigenous people group. And also we look into, for example, intersection with other type of development needs under SDG, for example. It can be read associated with some other stakeholder types. But we are currently just do mapping in terms of processes and who involved and who lead in the determining needs. Not necessarily yet look into specific stakeholder types, such as private sector, for example.
Thanks, Aidu. I think we lost you there a bit as well, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. George, did you want to comment as well?
Yes, I wanted to add a little bit on the same question. So the development of these reports is mainly country driven. So we are looking at the reports that countries have submitted. There is a section that we are also looking at the major processes that the government used to come up with the needs captured in those reports. And what we are finding out is most countries, there was a very detailed and deep stakeholder consultation. So we are hoping that the stakeholder comments and views and also needs were also captured in these reports. I think there was one of the map that showed that stakeholder consultation was one of the major processes that countries were employing to kind of elicit views from various stakeholders.
Thanks, George. And maybe I could just add to that as well, that mean, we will not be making a prioritization of our own in the report as such, but rather we are reflecting the information which is available. So the report will not sort of be, we will not be coming with suggestions in the report that, country X should be prioritizing this or the other, but rather we would just compile the data from the various reports already out there, be it national reports or reports from, as was stated earlier, from MDBs or UNDP or other UN agencies or bilateral donors. So this is there won't be any reflection of a prioritization as such between those that the data we have found, but rather we will just be trying to reflect that data in a manner which sort of helps us to see what kind of data is available. And as both George and Ida were saying, trying to respond to your question, we're not teasing out needs by stakeholder types, but rather we're seeing how different stakeholders are engaged or not in processes in determining needs. So there won't be we won't be looking into stakeholders perceived by non-state actors, because we won't be I don't foresee that we will be having that kind of information, but we will see to what extent non-state actors are engaged in determining needs on a national level, or if they have been engaged, for example, in the work of UNDP or the regional banks, that could then be reflected. Just if I could maybe add one thing, in relation to sort of how the needs will be reflected and portrayed in the report. One thing we've been discussing is to portray needs from various types of from various perspectives, and we would see potentially that there could be sort of 4 different entry points into portraying needs, and those between those 4, they might not be sort of comparable in the sense that you sort of you wouldn't be able to add those 4 entry points up, but you would just sort of have different ways of looking at needs. So one would be obviously the geographical perspective, from the country, regional, and global level. Another could be in terms of means of implementation, sort of a term which is then used in the convention, so relating to financial capacity building and technology transfer. A third could be to various sectors, so it could be infrastructure, energy, transportation, and so forth. And the fourth would be thematic, so either mitigation or adaptation. So with those sort of 4 different entry points, we could present different ways of looking at needs and how different ways of determining needs. And hopefully that could also give us insights into how countries are determining needs and what kind of needs there have been determined from a country perspective or from the regional and global reports. So I hope that answers your questions also on priorities. We have a new input in the chat. If I may ask, how much of the PDF titled can be useful? The background paper. I would assume that that is the background paper which can be found on the SCF website, which would be then presented to, which was presented to the SCF meeting. We have found the background paper was elaborated as sort of input to the discussions in the SCF, and if I recall correctly, we had one background paper elaborated ahead of our meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and another background paper elaborated, I think it was ahead of the meeting in March 2019, when we started discussions on the needs report. And both of those are found on the SCF website, and at least we found them to be useful in guiding our discussions. And I think the first background paper for the first discussion, which the SCF had, included also a number of various reports, which sort of as an example of reports which could be looked into. So that has been useful also for our work going forward. I hope that answers your question. Feel free to come back in the chat if you would have additional questions. I wonder if we maybe should be starting to wrap up. We've seen the various, the three sort of sets of questions we had. And thanks so much for the input both in the chat and objectives, and we'll be definitely doing our best to has been brought forward in this webinar, and of course also the two previous webinars, to the work and reflect that in the work of the report. And thanks to Noel for those additional references, which we're seeing in the chat as well. We're taking good note of those, and the team will be looking into those references to see how they could be reflected in the report as well. So before finishing up, is there any final reflections also from the team before we wrap up? Heidi or George or Athena?
Matthias, it's just to reiterate your earlier point and Zahir's point earlier. I'm surprised because this is normally not a very quiet crowd. So even for me, it's 2:30 in the morning my time. I'm very awake and very excited to talk about needs determination processes, and I know many of the people in the call are. But I would really encourage colleagues. Both, I see some focal points on the line. I see some really good advisors to different climate change agency committees. I know you have so much experience in your country processes. We would encourage you to really share specific case studies in particular, and the things that you're learning from your own processes, and the gaps and challenges that you also have faced, and examples of how you have overcome those gaps and challenges as you undertake some of the processes. I believe our call for evidence is open until the 20th of October, right, Matthias? So there's still a little bit of time to hear case studies at national and regional level from the participants on the call. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Yes, so we'll definitely we encourage you to come forward with more examples and keep providing us with references which could be which we could be looking into to see how they could be reflected in the report. And before also giving the floor to Zahir for final comments, just like to thank you all for engaging with us today and taking your time. And again, encourage you to continue to remain engaged with us as the report is being finalized in the months ahead. Should you have information or data that might contribute to the analysis being undertaken, please consider submitting your inputs under the official call for evidence, which runs until the 30th of October. So that's yet another few days which where you could contribute, and you can see the link to the call for evidence being posted also in the chat. Or you could also just send information directly to the Secretariat, and the email address is available on the UNFCCC website page for the report. So here, anything to wrap up from your side?
Thank you very much, Matthias, and I'd just like to thank the participants for taking the time to participate in this webinar. Just by way of just give you a brief of my reflections and in closing. Firstly, what colleagues need to understand is that the SCF is not going to tell you what your needs are. That is not the mandate that the SCF has. What the mandate that the SCF has been provided with is to look at what data is available, what reports are, to put it together into a format that is digestible to everybody, and that is what the report will reflect. The report will reflect basically what data and information is out there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, these are the needs of developing countries in relation to implementing the Convention and the Paris Agreement. These are your needs. It's not myself and Matthias who are going to determine what the needs are for Asia or Pacific. It is stuff that needs to come from you. Now, and this is important, and this is why we're having the webinar, is for us to elicit and obtain that information, because a lack of information, the report will represent that lack of information. I've been in this process for many years, and I hear often countries talking about the resources are not sufficient to address our needs, etc. This is your opportunity to actually tell us what your needs are, and so you need to take this opportunity to provide us. The report will reflect both the quantitative and qualitative information that is available out there. The report will reflect what the different methodologies are being used to determine these needs. The report will reflect what are some of the challenges that countries are experiencing and what are the gaps. That's what the report will reflect. It will not be any work on our part in terms of doing an assessment of what your needs are. So it is in your hands, the ball is in your court. We also would welcome any reports from the MDBs and from other institutions. I know that the GCF does not actually do a needs, but they do a consolidation of the portfolio of projects that countries are submitting in the form of proposals. I think in the GCF scenario, it was roughly around 18 billion, but that is based on what countries have requested for funding. On the GEF side, I'm not aware of the GEF doing the reports on determining needs, but I do know that in the case of the Biodiversity Convention, the convention itself has a process of determining the financing needs, and they do this prior to the GEF replenishments. There's a committee within that. Now, within the UNFCCC, there is in the convention accommodates for that, but we have never done that. So it largely depends on what you're providing us. In relation to the issue of the updated information, in the standing committee meeting that we did have, one of the recommendations is for the team to look at updated NDCs so that we can get the most relevant information. But that largely depends on whether that information is available or not, and given the timelines that we do have. The issue of the pandemic also emerged in the standing committee meeting. One caveat on that pandemic issue, the green recovery is much broader than just climate change. So it deals with issues of biodiversity and that. So if you do have information on the additional needs that have come about as a result of the pandemic in relation to climate change, we want to have that information. Send us that information so that we can capture that. Basically, colleagues, at the end of the day, the question is that we will only present what information that you are presenting to us. We will not be conjuring or drawing or analyzing any additional information in that. So you cannot blame us if the report does not reflect what you would like to see. We are basically reflecting what you are. So Matthias and myself are not doing any additional work, but we're just reflecting what what you are communicating to us, and that's what the whole process of country-drivenness, etc. is. So please, I urge all colleagues, if you are aware of information, if you're aware where we can find information, if you have any information, please provide that to the Secretariat so that we can provide a report that best and accurately reflects your needs in relation to implementing the Convention and the Paris Agreement. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Matthias, and over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Zahir, for summing up in that very comprehensive and thoughtful way. I think I couldn't agree with you more. So we look forward to seeing your input and your continued engagement from all the colleagues on the call. And thanks again to the team for all their hard work they're putting into this. There is really a lot of information available, and as Zahir said, there are also gaps. So we need sort of to that's also part of the work to see what information is actually not available then. So that could be reflected as well. So thanks again. If there are no more final thoughts from colleagues on the call, I'll suggest we wrap up here and stay safe, everyone. Looking forward to your continued engagement, and thanks to the team, Zahir and Secretariat for putting us together today. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.